In Las Vegas, what we know is nothing. Welcome, everybody. This is the Michael Newman Show. I am the aforementioned Michael Newman. Glad that you could be with us today. Please go to the website, michaelnewmanproductions.com. It's a fantastic website that you can keep in contact with me. Got a little blog section on there, and in that blog section we'll have the story, we'll have the podcast, it will have the video version of the podcast, and all the links to the stories that we talked about today, so you can check that out. Plus, you can check out the services link to see the type of things that I can do for you, and a whole lot more. Plus, you can contact me via the website and send me an email directly. You can also contact me on my Twitter. Newmaniac1 is my Twitter handle, so that's a lot of fun. And most importantly, especially when you're on the website, hit the support icon, and that takes you to Patreon. Tells you about Patreon first, and then you can go to Patreon. You can support the show for as little as $1 a day. More is great. Most people do like $10, but I got a new Patreon subscriber. I'm now up to 5. 5? Isn't that crazy? But they pledged $1 to me last night. So if you are the person that pledged $1, thank you very much. It feels good to know that people enjoy what I do and think it's important enough to give me a little money, right? So that's a pretty cool deal. All right, so what's happening out there, my friends? Well, strangely, I found a good reason, in fact, to actually find the motive for this shooter and find it as soon as possible. It's not a political deal. You see, people need an end to the story. Most of us, in fact, live kind of a mundane life. I mean, really. The world that we each individually live in and experience on a daily basis is pretty much same old. Not a whole lot happens, and we don't really want a whole lot to happen. There's not a lot of, intrigue within our lives. So to spice things up, without actually putting ourselves, in any danger, we dive into stories, TV, books, movies, which are all neatly packaged. High action, they've got conspiracies, clandestine meetings, and brilliantly simple resolutions in the end. When real life doesn't work out that way, we encounter things that just don't make sense, and our imaginations kind of fill in the gaps. And I think that's already starting to happen with this Las Vegas shooting. Truth is, for everything I've seen, there's not a whole lot to know about this guy other than he was obviously disturbed. But no, people can't accept that, and the conspiracies are coming. Now, there's a piece here from the Review Journal, and I was reading the piece. I mean, here's the headline: Las Vegas strip shooter targeted aviation. Oh, no, sorry, I'm looking at another story. But the other story that I was looking at, I messed that up. That is so bad. Very unprofessional of me. Las Vegas shooter Stephen Paddock spent decades hoarding guns and did not act alone. That is a piece from the Express out of the UK. And from the information that I've seen in the story, they're drawing some conclusions that simply are not there. But first, before we get to that, because I have a rundown and we're going to stay on task, my friend, the Review Journal does have a story about some other targets that this shooter, Stephen Paddock, had. Apparently, he used, I guess he was shooting from the Mandalay Bay Hotel, and he fired bullets at jet fuel tanks. Okay, I guess there's some fuel tanks out there. There's an airport not too far away. It's like a private airport. Lear jets and the high rollers come in. And because he's a high roller, it's a very good possibility that that's the reason he knew about this airport and where it was at and what could potentially be in those tanks. The bullets did leave a couple of holes in one of two circular white tanks. One of the bullets penetrated the tank but did not cause a fire or explosion. The tanks are only about 1,100 feet from the concert site, so had one of those giant tanks gone off, that would have been a bad deal. A source knowledgeable about airport operations said jet fuel is hard to ignite, and tanks like those across from Mandalay Bay have mechanisms in place to prevent fires, and I don't know what those mechanisms are, but they are right. It's actually, once again, kind of like the movies. You know, we see the movies and we're like, oh, you just shoot into the gas tank and it explodes, or If you shoot a propane tank, it just blows up. No, it doesn't work that way. Number one, it's hard to create you have to have an ignition source. You have to have a spark for something to blow up, for something to explode. And a bullet made out of brass and lead, it's very difficult to get those to spark, right? You would actually have to get the metal to crack in such a way where it would spark. And chances are that won't happen. And the only real way to start a fire or to make one of those things go off would be an incendiary round, or what they call a tracer, which is just a bullet basically covered in usually like a phosphorus type material. It burns very brightly. And when they're used for, military purposes, usually in machine guns, because machine gun, especially one that is mounted on like a Humvee or mounted on a helicopter, and you're shooting down at something, you're not really using your sights. You're using those tracer rounds because you can actually see where the rounds are going. They put one like every third or fifth or whatever round it is, and you can actually see the bullets and where they're hitting, right? And that's the best way for you to aim. It's kind of like having a laser sight, so it just points where the bullets are going. Those things, if they get into a tank and there's enough air in there, if there's enough, literally air in there, enough of a mixture inside there, they might actually cause a fire. As a matter of fact, Mythbusters, what a great show. I'm so unhappy that that's no longer on the air. But Mythbusters did this myth a couple of different times. I wanted to find the one that was on gas tanks, like gas tanks in your car. I couldn't find that one online. But this is the one that they did about propane tanks, shooting a propane tank, and pretty much nothing happens.
The Mythbusters have blown holes a mile wide in the myth that 007 could make a propane tank explode using his 9mm handgun.
We've shot it twice, haven't been able to puncture it.
It took explosives to create a Bond-worthy blast.
That was the biggest ball of flame I've ever seen!
The guys are nuts. That's why I like the show. We like to see things explode. So in that instance, they're just using a 9mm. It wouldn't penetrate the outside. This guy in Las Vegas was, of course, using a high-powered rifle, which chances are, unless it's an extremely strong tank, it's going to penetrate, because high-powered rifles are very, very different than a 9mm. But they continued on, and they wanted to get the thing to explode there on Mythbusters. So what do? They go to a high-powered rifle. Not only a high-powered rifle, a high cyclical rate rifle, not really a rifle, it's actually called a minigun. They use that with incendiary rounds or tracer rounds, and of course they got the reaction they were looking for.
Casino Royale myth.
This is propane tank with incendiary rounds. Going hot. In 3, 2, 1.
You see how those bullets are coming out, and you could actually see the bullets hitting the target, because there's no real way to aim that weapon, and that's what tracer rounds are. And of course, you get a tracer round into something like that, it could go off. Now, if it's a tank like kerosene's hard to ignite. Believe it or not, so is gasoline. And if you were to shoot even a tracer round, an incendiary round, into a completely full tank of gas, chances are it's just going to put out the round, right? So that's the way things work in the real life, but that's not what you see on TV, and that could be what this guy was thinking. Hey, I'll just fire a shot into this gas tank, and it'll go off. We don't know if that was his first target, his last target, or whatever it was, but that's one of the things he did. I don't know what it means. It could just mean that he was trying to kill as many people as possible for whatever reason, a motive that we don't know as yet. But that's the way it is. Now, on to the conspiracy theories. The story from the Express out of the UK. Well, first, it starts out with some video of a press conference with the local police officers there.
So today I'll provide you some updates on our investigation of the mass shooting Sunday night at Route 91. More than 100 investigators have spent the last 72 hours combing through the life of 64-year-old Stephen Paddock to produce a profile of someone I will call disturbed and dangerous.
Okay, he's disturbed and dangerous. We know this. I mean, that's the only way to classify a guy like this.
What we know is Stephen Paddock is a man who spent decades acquiring weapons and ammo and living a secret life.
Now, I'm not sure what the secret life is. They never go into the secret life. He spent decades acquiring weapons and ammo. What does that mean? He was a gun collector? There's a lot of people that there's a ton of people within the gun-owning community that phrase would also include. I know a lot of people that have been collecting guns for decades. They buy them, they sell them, they get new ones, they like certain guns, they keep them. They have some guns that they absolutely will never fire because every time you fire them, their value goes down. You know, things like that. So any one of those people have been collecting guns for decades, 30, 40, 50 years, sometimes even more than that. That doesn't tell you anything. That in and of itself is not any sort of sign of something strange going on.
Much of which will never be fully understood. He meticulously planned on the worst domestic attack in United States history.
Now, that's one thing that I would like to hear about is the level that he might have gone to plan this thing. People are saying that, well, the sheriff, that's Sheriff Joseph Lombardo, he goes on to say, at face value, he had to have some sort of help at some point, and we want to ensure that we find an answer. Maybe he was a superhuman who figured out all of this on his own, but it would be hard for me to believe that. If that's a quote from a sheriff, well, I'm sorry, but you're kind of an idiot, right? You're kind of an idiot. Because all you've got to do is spend a little time in Las Vegas. First, you have an idea in your head, right? You want to go hurt some people. You spend a lot of time in Las Vegas, and you look out, and he's probably been in the Mandalay Bay. He's probably been in that room before. That would be an interesting question to know if he'd been booked in that room previously. And you're out there, and you're looking through the windows going, man, I could probably do something from this vantage point, couldn't I? All I'd need, especially if you're a shooter, you're sitting up there, you're going, man, I could probably pick people off from here. Heck, the guy might have, in previous engagements, went up there with a sniper rifle and was just looking at people. Who knows? And, you know, he had money, he had all these guns, and he's also a high roller there. He's a guy that spends a lot of money. So people, and he's not a problem. He wins money, he loses money. Apparently, he's never had a problem with the casino. Everybody probably thinks he's a nice guy. So they're not going to ask him any questions. They're not going to be rifling through his bags. Not a guy that spends as much money as he does. So so they're not going to find the weapons. He's going to be able, especially when he's created a pattern. You know, he's been at the Mandalay Bay many times. He's been in Vegas many times, spends weeks at a time there. He's got a pattern of being there. People probably know him. People that work at the Mandalay Bay probably know him, or at least know of him. And he could have easily had several bags, and he goes up and down with bags and brings all the weapons in, and then just decides it's time to shoot some people. And if he knew of the concert, I mean, it's not like the concert was a secret. It's been going on for a couple of years. He might have seen it last year or the year before. He might have been there last year. Who knows? That would be an interesting question I'd like to know, too. If he was in the room, was he at the venue last year or a previous year? And could that have given him the idea to do this specific crime? Who knows? I mean, there's a lot of things that have to be looked at. But the point is, it doesn't take a genius at all to come up with what he did. Not at all. Now, there's people coming out of, there was, 22,000 people at this concert, and now there's people coming out of the woodwork with stories about what happened. Michael Savage is a radio talk show host. I personally don't like him. I don't think he's all that conservative. I think he's just a mad person. Matter of fact, I don't see him as a conservative at all. I just think he's an angry person. I don't know if he really feels that way. I don't know what he's like in real life. But he just seems like an awful human being, and I don't listen to his show, and it's just his show isn't very good anyway. I do have sort of an inside track. I never really got the story on this, but my former radio host, co-host, apparently worked with him years ago on The Savage Nation. Was one of the board ops there, and or a producer or something. He might have been the program director of the radio station. And he never really said anything about Michael Savage specifically, but I got the distinct impression that he thought he was a monster. So I'm not a big fan of Michael Savage. And he gets somebody to call into his radio show that says, "There's another shooter. There's another shooter on the grassy knoll."
Well, when we were first there, we heard the popping of the sounds, and we thought it was a firecracker, And it was only like, 3 or 4 pop, pop, pops. And then it got quiet, and then a couple more pop, 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 pops, and then it just started spraying, it just nonstop bullets shooting. So everybody started running, and we just ducked. My husband and I, we just went on the ground and froze. And I remember, there's a girl that was standing right next to me that was shot in the stomach, and she had a huge bullet wound in her stomach. It was huge. It wasn't a little tiny thing, and she was bleeding profusely. It was horrible, and then people were just freaking out, and so everybody ran, and we were just still standing there, and my husband said, "Gail, we gotta go, we gotta run, we're gonna get shot." So we got up and we started running toward the vendor tents. They're the white plastic tents, and there was a Metro Police officer that was out there, and he saw us running, and he said, come here, get here, and he grabbed me, and he pulled us inside the tent, and we went down, and the shots kept going and going, and then they would stop, and then we were like, okay, it's okay, it's all over, and then they would start all over again, and it seemed to me, and I'm not a pro on guns and bullets, anything, but there was like higher sounding bullets and then a really lower, deeper bullet. And as we were laying there...
Okay, it's nice that she recognizes she doesn't know anything about guns and ballistics and what have you, but that doesn't mean anything. 2 different pitches of bullets. Number one, the shooter was shooting from, as far as we can tell, with the 2 broken windows on the Mandalay Bay, he was shooting from 2 different vantage points. And any sound, anything generating sound, is going to sound differently, right? It could be in timbre and in volume. As you turn that sound-making device in a direction that is either toward you or away from you, right? That's number one. Number two, the Mandalay Bay isn't the only building in the room, right, in that area. There's a bunch of other buildings. There's a bunch of other things. And in relation to you, wherever that sound is coming from, it's going to be echoing. It's going to be echoing. You might hear the same gunshot multiple times as it echoes around the room, so you can actually hear it coming from multiple different places. So simply hearing gunshots is really not, and different timbres or pitches of gunshots is really not any evidence.
It sounded like the shots were getting closer to us, and I'm going, oh my God, we're going to get shot. They're going to see us in this tent. Because it seemed...
And like I said, that can be an echo. If the echo of the report of the rifle hits something that's close to you and then hits you, it's going to sound like it's closer. You're going to hear it far away, and then you're going to hear it closer. And it's going to, because of the intensity of the sound, it's going to sound very, very similar. It's going to sound potentially like a first-generation report.
Like somebody, I'm not saying this by any means, but to me, it sounded like somebody was actually walking from the crowd from west to east through the crowd and shooting, because everybody was going in one direction because there's no way out.
Okay, and that's where the brain starts kicking in and starts making up sort of information, right? You're filling in the gaps. This is what I heard. This is what I think it sounded like. So this must be what happens. And all of this is based on very, very little evidence, number one, from a layman, so to speak, that doesn't really know anything about weapons and certainly doesn't know anything about acoustics and acoustic science. So I'm sure she's not lying, right? She doesn't strike me initially as somebody that would just make this up. I guess it's possible, but we'll just give her the benefit of the doubt on that. We'll just say that she heard what she heard. But just because a lady hears it doesn't mean it's true.
And then they would stop, and then it would be like higher pitches, and then no sound. So, and then the sound would start again, but they were on top of each other, it sounded. I was freaking out. Obviously.
Well, hold on, you just
That's
said
another important part of this. I was freaking out. So the memory and the recollection of a person in a time of high stress is not always accurate. It's not always reliable. And, investigators will tell you that. Anybody that is trying to piece together a crime is going to tell you that. Hell, you can go to a crime scene that has a whole bunch of witnesses. Let's say there's 10 witnesses. If you've got 10 different witnesses, even when some of those witnesses may be standing right next to each other, you're still going to get 10 different stories of what happened on that event. And people see things and they forget little details, but then their brain fills those things in. So the memory is not necessarily the best possible way to figure out what happened.
on top of each other, meaning the higher sounding bullet and then the lower sounding, or let's say the sound of one gun higher, then lower, and they were coming at you at the same time?
Yes, they sounded at the same time, and the one that was lower kept getting closer sounding to us. And I'm thinking your brain goes through all these images and thoughts, and I'm thinking, oh my God, it sounds like there's somebody on the ground that is shooting. And what was so bizarre about this,
now, I don't know if this part is true or not. This sounds like it could be sort of made up, and it could be a scenario where she didn't see something, and from her vantage point, this is what it looked like. This is certainly something that would have to be looked into, but I don't buy it for a moment.
Is that Mandalay Bay was on our right. This creep was on the, 32nd floor, and the girl that was standing right beside me, maybe 7-8 inches behind me, got shot straight in her stomach, right above her belly button. Now, how does a bullet come straight down and make a left turn and hit her in the stomach? And I don't understand it.
Wait, hold on. I don't understand. So the hotel is on the right, but she got shot from the left?
She got shot straight in the center. We were facing due south. Mandalay.
So you were facing away from the hotel, Gail. I want to be clear. You were facing away from the hotel.
Our right shoulder would be facing Mandalay Bay.
Okay, on the right shoulder, there's the hotel. Now your stomach is facing diagonal to that hotel, and you're saying the girl next to you was facing in the same direction as you and your husband?
Yes, we were both facing west.
Okay, so you're asking how could she get struck directly in her stomach from that direction when there was allegedly no shooter there?
Well, see, that's what's so bizarre, because I even thought that. Because how could a bullet be coming from our right, which was on our west? We're facing direct south. A bullet would have to come straight up and make a 90-degree left turn and go into her stomach.
It's the magic bullet theory. Has anybody heard that one before? Magic bullet theory. Some of that is probably, I don't want to say made up. We're going to give her the benefit of the doubt here. If you don't see the whole scenario, if you don't understand the whole scenario, you could easily come to a conclusion that isn't true. She says the girl was right in front of her. Is it possible that as she was running behind this woman, she looked down for a moment, or looked at her husband for a moment, or somebody, the police officer that was with them said something, she looked over, and at that point in time, so did this woman. She may have turned to the side, maybe there was someone next to her, and that's when she got struck. So as she turned to the side, she was struck in the stomach, and then moved and fell forward through her momentum. So she was facing in a direction before and after the shot that would seem to make that bullet need to go through her side and not her stomach. But at the moment the bullet struck, she was actually turning to see someone, talk to someone, find someone. Maybe somebody yelled behind her. Maybe she heard something that she wanted to look at, and she turned and was struck at that moment. That's not out of the realm of possibility. So this is what's going on. People are filling in things. We don't have a lot of information on this guy. The information that we have is that he was just a guy that went nuts, and we can't accept that. In this day and age, there must be a political motivation. In this day and age, there must be a terroristic motivation. People wouldn't just go out and do this, and in fact, they do. People go nuts and do stuff like this. And unfortunately, if we don't get some more information soon, the conspiracies are just going to explode. Now, the conspiracy theorists out there, you can tell them all the factual information you want to tell them. They've already made up their mind on what the facts are. So I'm not worried about those people. I'm worried about a plausible story that most sane, right-thinking people will accept. And if we can come up with that soon, I think that would benefit us here in the United States. I just think it would benefit everybody. Now, of course, this is a horrible, terrible scenario for everybody that was involved, but there was one good story that came out of it. A victim of this horrible shooting in Las Vegas had a fairly inspiring statement of respect for the presidency. It's gone viral on Facebook. I'm not sure exactly. This is a Blaze story that's talking about it, and I'm not sure exactly what time it was published. But Gunderson's simple Facebook post has been shared more than 240,000 times and garnered nearly 8.3 million views in the 8 hours since it was posted. There was a video that is involved, and this is what people are talking about. Here's the video.
Definitely pointed out.
It's the guy in his hotel room, in his hospital room. He's in a lot of pain. He was shot in the leg. The first lady walks in. He stands up for a moment to shake her hand and tries to sort of balance on one leg. He's waiting on the president. He's talking to some people. He's leaning on the bed, and as soon as the president comes in, he stands up and shakes his hand. And it doesn't seem like that's such a big deal, right? But it is a big deal. Thomas Gunderson is the guy's name. He was shot in the leg, in a lot of pain. You know, that's what happens, especially when you stand on it, right? I mean, people have had a broken leg before. You stand on that, it hurts. And when he saw the president headed towards him in his hospital room, he willed himself to get up on his feet and show respect for the office of the presidency. He explained why he pushed through the pain on his Facebook post. Quote, "I will never lie down when the president of this great country comes to shake my hand. There may be plenty of issues in this country, but I will always respect my country, my president, and my flag. Shot in the leg or not, I will stand to show my president the respect he deserves." That is a pretty powerful statement, especially in a day and age where all of our heroes, those men in the NFL, all they can do is sit on their ass. There you go. I want to get off of this story for a little bit. Ben Shapiro, you've heard of Ben before. He's got the Ben Shapiro Show, Daily Wire. He's I don't know if he owns it, but he's the boss over there, I guess. Pretty smart guy. I like Ben. I think we disagree on some things. Ben doesn't go far enough as far as I don't think he understands the level to which the left will go. So maybe he's just too nice of a guy. Maybe he just doesn't get the evil that is on the left and how far they will go to meet their goals. And that's fine. We can have that conversation. But what we're going to talk about here is in Sacramento, California, there was a meeting, basically, a discussion about hate speech versus free speech and how to protect the Constitution while limiting hate speech and all these different things. And one of the problems was, a big topic of conversation is what's happening on the college campuses there in California. And no conservatives, including Ben, who was the target of some of this violence, were asked to speak. So for Ben to get his 2 cents in, it was literally 2 minutes of 2 cents. He had to come and be part of the audience participation, right? You get 2 minutes. That's how it is. He wasn't one of the invited speakers. And in his 2 minutes, this is what he said.
Here at the legislature is to ensure that our freedom of expression is maintained, that our First Amendment rights are maintained. And what that means first and foremost, in my experiences on college campuses, is that the heckler's veto must be stopped. So I was at Cal State Los Angeles in February 2016, and there was almost a riot there, and the police were not allowed to do their jobs, and students were physically assaulted in the crowd. It is the job of this legislature to ensure that police can do their jobs. And when they do their jobs, when they're allowed to do that at places like UC Berkeley, everything goes fine. And I'd like to make a point here about UC Berkeley. The reason it cost $600,000 to bring me to UC Berkeley was not because of me. Okay, everybody keeps suggesting that it was because I was coming. I'm so controversial and so terrible. I came exactly 1 year before, and it cost this many dollars. It cost $0 for security at UC Berkeley. The reason it cost $600,000 at UC Berkeley is because Antifa and violent groups had decided that Berkeley was their domain, and they were going to be able to run roughshod over law enforcement there. And this does bring up one final point that I want to make in the long period of time that I have to discuss, and that is the problem with a legislative body such as yours trying to draw lines specifically about what hate speech constitutes. Because the fact is that one of the reasons groups like Antifa show up is not because they know who I am. It's because they have been told by people that I am promulgating hate speech, which is utterly false and utterly untrue. There are people who say vile things and with whom I disagree. Among them, people like Milo Yiannopoulos, who sent me a picture of a black baby on the day of my child's birth because I wasn't sufficiently standing up for the white population, supposedly. But that does not mean that the legislature gets to decide what hate speech is. I've been labeled a promulgator of hate speech when I was the #1 target of hate speech according to the ADL among the journalistic community in 2016. So let me suggest that as a legislature, your chief job is to ensure that my taxpayer dollars in this state go toward making sure that people like me and people with whom I disagree get to speak in places like college campuses, and not toward regulating what speech you find good and what speech you find bad, because it's a really dangerous business, and there's speech I don't like, there's speech you don't like, but if we can't agree that there is a difference between speech and violence, we're not going to be able to have a free state, let alone a free country.
I don't think it's a real good idea, and he's brought this up many times, that he was the #1 receiver of hate speech in such categories over the past year or whatever it is. And I'm sure it's true that he was named that, but the idea, look, the question here is whether, not what hate speech is, but whether or not hate speech exists, okay? Does hate speech exist? My point is that hate speech doesn't exist. It's just speech. If hate speech exists, then there would be a specific definition for it and not what somebody's feelings are in regards to it. So when you say you're the #1 receiver of hate speech, then you are accepting that it exists and thereby lending credence to their argument, right? Hey, I received hate speech and I don't care is not an argument. If it were me on the other side, I would say, so hate speech exists. You recognize that. We are saying, and you agree with that, we are saying that there is a legitimate damage done to society and individuals based on hate speech. Thereby, it's a type of violence, and thereby we have a right to limit it. So don't bring that up again, Ben. I think it's a bad argument. I will go farther than hate speech. I will go farther than hate speech. I will defend hate. I will defend hate. A lot of people go out there and they'll say, I'll run down the racists with you. Okay. And I can understand, and that is your right to do that. That is your right to speak out against those people, and I don't want to stop you. But the moment that we start to make an emotion illegal, we go farther than taking out the First Amendment. What we do is relegate individuals to less than human. People have feelings. Sometimes we don't know where those feelings come from. Sometimes those feelings are sort of bred in us through, maybe we're taught that. And feelings in and of themselves are not bad. Regardless of what those feelings are, they're not bad. Or at least not bad to me. I don't care what your feelings are. I don't care when you're happy or when you're sad or when you're hateful or whatever. I don't care. All we can concentrate on as a society and specifically as a government are actions. Actions are the only thing that matter. That's the only thing we can judge. That is, in fact, the only thing that we can prove. Can you prove that somebody hates? Can you prove that somebody's motivation was a deep-seated emotional dislike for somebody? And even if you can, by the way, whatever crime was perpetuated, if you can prove that it was hate, does it make the crime worse? Well, we'll put it in a different way. A guy dies. Let's put it this way. A white guy kills a black guy. Is it better or worse if it's about hate or money? Think about it that way. I mean, the guy's still dead. It's the same gun, same bullet, same situation. But some would say, well, he hated him, so we must do something about it. No, it's not about hate. There's no logical reason to have a different set of punishments for a crime. When the crime is the same, there's no logical reason to have a different set of punishments based on an emotional feeling that, number one, you can't prove in the first place, and number two, that person has the right to have. Okay? If hate is a motivation and you kill somebody, it doesn't really matter. You killed somebody. I don't care about motivations. I care about actions in society. I want to stop the action. So whether you kill somebody because you hate them or you kill somebody because they stole money from you, that person is just as dead, and I want you punished so that you will never do that crime again. I don't care about why. I just don't want you to kill anymore. So I won't go as far as to say I'll hunt down all these people. I'm not going to hunt down anybody until they do something wrong. That's the way I see it. One quick one to get out of here. You got to be kind of scared of this. Man, apparently dogs can kill you. And I don't mean like biting you. I mean little bitty cute little puppy dogs can make you really sick. They make you really, really sick. Yes, they do. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention say dozens of people have been sickened with infections linked to puppies sold at Petland pet stores. Oh! I'm not even going to try to say the name of the bacteria. It's an outbreak happening, affected about 55 people in 12 states. 55 people in 12 states. 13 people have been hospitalized. Isn't that crazy? This is an increase from 39 cases reported in 7 states last month. Oh no. The infection can be spread by contact with dog feces. Well, quit using it as Play-Doh. That's all I've got to say. This is part of the piece from CBS.
To wash your hands, and wash your hands thoroughly with soap and running water for at least 20 seconds anytime you come into contact with animals, especially when you're cleaning up animal poop or in contact with their food or their environment.
I will never get this disease. I won't. I'll let a dog lick the inside of my mouth. I don't care. I've never been that. You should see my house. It is just a petri dish of disease. And guess what? I don't get sick. The only thing that ever gets me sick is pollen. Son of a bitch and pollen. And there's nothing you can do about it. Nothing you can do about pollen. And that doesn't even happen much anymore. So apparently your dog could get, you know what? Okay, your dog can get you sick. And if there's children in the house, you're not being responsible because the dog can get you sick and there's children, so you got to burn the dog. Yep, you got to burn the dog. You know why? Because people have no immune systems. They're all
worthless and weak.
There you go. Worthless and weak. All right, if you couldn't tell, that is the end of the show. Thank you so much for joining me. I am Michael Newman. Please go to the website, michaelnewmanproductions.com. That is your contact with me. The blog page is on there, so you can get the links for all the stories that we talked about on the show. You can also check out the services that I provide and a whole lot of other stuff, including you can email me by clicking the contact link. You can also get a hold of me on my Twitter account. Newmaniac1 is my Twitter account. And if you follow me on Twitter, then you'll see when all the new stuff comes out. It's pretty simple. And most importantly, please, please, please support the show. Go to the website, click the support icon. It's real simple. And that takes you to a page that tells you about Patreon. Then just log into Patreon and help me out there and keep the show going. Have a great afternoon.
Wow, see ya.